Ava Sinclair didn't walk into the boutique looking for trouble. She walked in wearing confidence stitched from every sleepless night she'd spent chasing her dream. The air was rich with designer perfume, whispers of generational wealth hanging in the air like silk. But when Ava crossed the threshold, the smiles froze. Eyes narrowed. A sales associate intercepted her like she'd tripped an alarm. "We don't offer payment plans," she said, lips curled in contempt. Moments later, Ava was escorted out, dignity bruised. But as the glass doors closed behind her, she didn't just leave. She planted a seed. The boutique was the kind that whispered money, the kind with no price tags, no loud music, no rush. Everything from the marble floors to the minimalist racks radiated quiet exclusivity. The mannequins stood like sentinels, draped in couture that cost more than rent in most zip codes. This was Langston Atelier, a landmark for old money fashion and new money validation. Ava Sinclair paused just outside the door, her reflection cast in the thick glass. She adjusted the collar of her tailored camel coat, thrifted, then custom-altered by her own hands. Her curls were coiled high in a proud bun, gold hoops gleaming like armor. She took a breath, the kind that gathered strength from every rejection she'd ever swallowed. And then she walked in. The store fell silent. Not completely, but subtly, like a record skipping just a beat. The receptionist glanced up from behind a crystal counter. One sales associate, perched on kitten heels near a wall of handbags, stiffened. Ava felt it instantly, that electric charge of not belonging. But she smiled anyway. She wouldn't shrink. She moved toward a velvet display holding a structured blazer, ivory silk, exaggerated shoulders, sharp lapels. She reached out, fingers brushing the fabric. That's when she heard it. "Excuse me, ma'am." The voice came crisp, coated in condescension. A woman, early 40s, platinum blonde bob, tight smile. Her name tag read Vanessa, the kind of employee who'd mastered the art of polite cruelty. "Can I help you with something?" Vanessa asked, stepping squarely into Ava's path. Ava offered a smile. "Just browsing." Vanessa's gaze flicked down to Ava's sneakers. Classic white Reeboks, immaculately clean. "We usually serve clients by appointment," she said smoothly, even though no sign anywhere said so. "You do have an appointment, don't you?" Ava's smile faltered, just for a second. Number I didn't realize that was required. Vanessa's expression hardened, no longer pretending. "We've had incidents. People coming in just to take photos, disturb the clients. I'm sure you understand." Before Ava could respond, a second woman appeared, this one with a walkie-talkie clipped to her waist. A silent nod passed between them. Within seconds, Ava was being ushered toward the door, Vanessa trailing behind with that tight smile again. "I'm sure there's something more. Your speed a few blocks down," she said. "They have cute little shops over on Maple." Ava didn't fight, didn't scream. She walked, her spine like steel, though her stomach twisted in knots. Outside, the wind hit her face like a slap. She stood still, blinking at the boutique she'd dreamed of entering for years. Her fists clenched in her coat pockets, not because of the humiliation, but because she knew, deep down, she wasn't just a customer. She was a creator, a visionary, a designer who belonged in that world more than they ever would. As she turned away from Langston Atelier, her heart pounded, not with defeat, but with a vow. They had no idea who they'd just kicked out, but they were about to find out. Ava didn't cry until she got home. Not in the Uber, not in the elevator, not even when she passed the neighbor's nosy glance as she keyed into her apartment. But the second the door clicked shut behind her and she was alone, truly alone, the silence roared. She collapsed to the floor, coat still on, purse sliding from her shoulder. Her body curled instinctively, like a child trying to shield herself from a blow that had already landed. The boutique incident looped in her head like a cruel movie. The condescension, the smirks, the way they looked through her like she was less than real. She buried her face in her hands and let the sobs come, not just from embarrassment, but from exhaustion. from years of climbing with no rope, from daring to believe that maybe, just maybe, her dream was finally within reach. Ava lived in a studio no bigger than a hotel room, but every inch of it screamed vision. Fabric rolls leaned against the walls. Her industrial sewing machine took up the kitchen counter. Mood boards, fashion sketches, and pages torn from magazines were pinned across the space like a mosaic of ambition. In the corner, lit by a single string of fairy lights, was her vision board. It had words like Creative Director, Paris Fashion Week, and Black Excellence in Fashion. In the center, a photo of Langston Atelier, printed from the website, circled in red. She stared at that picture now, the same store that had tossed her out like trash. Something in her shifted. Ava stood up, wiped her face, and grabbed a marker. With one smooth motion, she crossed out the words Feature In, scrawled above the boutique's image. Then, right beneath it, in bold black letters, she wrote, Own it. Not tomorrow, not someday, but one day, soon. If they wouldn't let her walk in the front door, she'd come through the back, buy the building, and own the damn keys. Let them laugh. Let them dismiss her. Let them underestimate the girl from South Central with a sewing machine and a dream. She didn't need their validation. What she needed was focus. That night, Ava poured herself a cup of cheap instant coffee, pushed aside the hurt, and got back to work. Her hands were steady as she threaded the needle of her machine, the rhythmic hum drowning out doubt. She sketched late into the night, designing pieces that told her story. Pieces with edge, soul, and elegance. Clothing that couldn't be ignored because they carried the weight of every door slammed in her face. Somewhere between the needle strokes and the fabric scraps, a fire reignited in her. They saw a nobody that day. But she was building something. And when it was ready, they'd beg to be part of it. Let them laugh now. She wasn't done. She was just getting started. The world only saw Ava Sinclair in the glossy photos, the magazine features, the red carpet moments. What they didn't see was the grinding, sleepless hours she spent on her own, her dreams held together by coffee stains and frayed seams. Every day, Ava juggled 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. By day, she worked as a sales associate at a downtown department store where she wore a fake smile and folded shirts no one would ever buy. By night, she transformed into a one-woman design army. The studio apartment, tiny and claustrophobic, became her battleground. Fabric scraps scattered like confetti around her, patterns crammed between bookshelves, old receipts piled on the floor like a testament to how much she'd sacrificed. She would leave work at 7 p.m., fight through traffic, then dive into sewing until her eyes blurred and her back ached. The same tune played in her head. One more design, one more piece. Just keep going. Most people would have given up. But Ava had something they didn't, a refusal to let rejection define her. After the boutique incident, she had burned the shame like kindling, and now that fire kept her awake, fed her ambition. She knew she wasn't just building a clothing line, she was building her legacy. At first, things were small. A few hundred followers on Instagram, some sporadic likes, a handful of orders from friends and family. But Ava wasn't discouraged. She knew what they all said. The industry is saturated. The competition is fierce. Dreams are just that. Dreams. But none of that mattered to Ava. She wasn't chasing their approval. She was chasing her own vision. And her vision. It didn't fit inside the narrow boxes they tried to shove her into. Late one night, as she hunched over a sketchbook that had become as much a part of her as her own heartbeat, an idea sparked. Ava wanted to make clothes for black women, clothes that celebrated their strength, elegance, and resilience. She wasn't going to be another faceless designer making clothes for the rich and famous. She wanted to create pieces that resonated with those who'd been ignored, discarded, overlooked. It wasn't just about fashion. It was about representation, about reclaiming space in an industry that had always told women like her, you don't belong. By the time the sun rose, she'd sketched an entire line, vibrant, sharp, unapologetically bold. She named it Sinclair Mode, a brand that embodied everything she was, and everything she wanted to be. The first few months were a whirlwind of small wins and crushing losses. Ava lived off instant noodles and boxed wine, skipping meals to fund her designs. She'd spent hours learning the ins and outs of e-commerce, graphic design, branding, skills that didn't come naturally but had to be learned quickly. Then, one morning, her phone pinged. A DM from a celebrity stylist. Her heart raced as she read the message. "Saw your jacket on Instagram. I have a client who needs it for the Grammys. Can we make it happen?" Ava almost dropped the phone. This was her break. She hadn't expected it to come like this, but she knew one thing: she wasn't going to let it slip through her fingers. In less than 48 hours, the jacket was in the hands of a stylist, and the world would see it on the red carpet. Ava had no idea how much that moment would change everything, but she knew one thing. She wasn't the same woman who'd been thrown out of Langston Atelier. The hustle, the sleepless nights, the sacrifices, they were starting to pay off. And she wasn't going to stop. Not now. Not ever. 2 years had passed since Ava Sinclair was humiliated outside Langston Atelier. 2 years of sleepless nights, gut-wrenching sacrifices, and relentless drive. And now her brand, Sinclair Mode, was a rising force in fashion, celebrated by celebrities, influencers, and style bloggers alike. She had gone from an underdog, fighting for recognition, to a designer whose creations graced the pages of major magazines and the bodies of A-list stars. But she wasn't done. Not by a long shot. It was early on a Tuesday morning when Ava's phone buzzed, interrupting her in the middle of designing a new collection. She glanced at the screen. An unknown number, area code 212, New York City. She hesitated for a moment, fingers hovering over the screen. It could be anything: a client, a supplier, or another cold call from someone selling fake collaborations. She swiped to answer with a sigh. "Hello? This is Ava Sinclair." "Miss Sinclair?" A voice on the other end was deep, smooth, and unmistakably professional. "This is Richard Langston, from Langston Atelier." Ava froze. The world seemed to still. Langston Atelier, the very place that had rejected her, kicked her out like she was invisible. The boutique she had dreamed of entering, only to be humiliated by its staff. Richard Langston, the owner of that store, was on the phone, speaking to her like they were old friends. "I'm sorry to reach out so suddenly," Richard continued, his tone polite but urgent. "We've been watching you, and I have to say, your work is nothing short of brilliant." Ava's heart raced, but she kept her voice steady, careful not to let her surprise show. "Thank you, but I'm curious. Why the call?" Richard's voice softened, as if weighing his words. "We've noticed a shift in the industry, Ms. Sinclair. More and more, we're seeing a demand for diversity, for true originality. And quite frankly, Sinclair Mode has caught our eye. We'd like to discuss the possibility of a collaboration." Ava felt a cold rush of disbelief flood through her. A collaboration? With them? The same boutique that had scoffed at her, that had shown her the door like she was nothing? It took everything in her not to laugh, but she didn't. Instead, she leaned in, her voice calm and calculated. "What kind of collaboration are we talking about?" There was a slight pause on the other end of the line. "We want to bring Sinclair Mode into Langston Atelier. We believe it would be a perfect fit for our clientele. We'd like to discuss how we can work together to expand your brand and offer a select collection in our store." Ava's mind raced, her pulse quickening. She'd fought for this moment for years. She'd bled for it. But the words she wanted to say didn't come right away. Instead, a single question hung in the air. What was this really about? She thought about the years of humiliation, the people who had told her she'd never make it, the boutique that had thrown her out like a piece of trash. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Langston," she said, her voice measured. "But I have one condition before we discuss anything further." Richard's curiosity piqued. "Go ahead." "If you want to work with me," Ava said, "it's not just a collaboration. I want equity. I want a partnership. I want to be more than a vendor in your store. I want a stake in Langston Atelier." There was a long silence on the other end. Richard's breath hitched slightly. He hadn't expected that. Ava continued, her tone unwavering. "I'm not just here for a quick deal. I've earned my place in this industry, and I'll be treated accordingly." Richard finally spoke, his voice tinged with reluctant respect. "You're bold, Miss Sinclair. I like that. Let's meet." As she hung up, Ava felt a sense of power wash over her. This wasn't the same Ava who had been kicked out years ago. No, this was the woman who would make them beg to work with her. The real work was about to begin, and she wasn't backing down. Not for anyone. Ava stood before the gleaming glass doors of Langston Atelier, the same doors that had once denied her entry. The boutique's polished exterior gleamed under the midday sun, an aura of wealth and exclusivity emanating from every corner. She was calm now, her heart beating steadily, but her mind was on fire with the memory of how they had treated her. This was it. She stepped inside, the bells on the door jingling softly as they recognized her presence. The air was cooler in here, laced with an intoxicating blend of luxury fragrances, expensive leather, and polished wood. Everything was pristine, designed to make you feel small yet significant, the perfect playground for the powerful. But today, Ava was the power. She'd chosen an outfit carefully for this meeting. A tailored black blazer with bold shoulder pads, paired with sleek pants that kissed the floor in all the right places. A subtle but statement-making piece from her latest collection, a nod to her Afro-futurist roots with a modern twist. Ava was no longer the girl who'd been shown the door. She was the woman about to rewrite the rules. As she entered the plush conference room, Richard Langston rose to meet her, offering a handshake. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with an air of confidence that could intimidate anyone. But Ava felt no fear. She'd been practicing this moment for years. "Miss Sinclair," Richard greeted her, his smile warm, but there was a shadow behind his eyes. "It's an honor to finally meet you in person." Ava nodded, not breaking eye contact. "The honor is mine." They sat across from each other, the table between them almost too big for the intimacy of the moment. Richard began talking about the potential collaboration, going over the numbers, the designs, the benefits of combining her brand with Langston Atelier's established reputation. Ava listened, but she wasn't hearing everything. Her thoughts were on the years of sweat, tears, and rejection that had brought her here. She couldn't help but notice how Richard spoke about her brand like it was a novelty, something to be admired from a distance, not a force to be reckoned with. The more he spoke, the more she could feel the undercurrent of control, of him trying to position himself as the decision-maker. When he paused for a breath, Ava leaned forward, her gaze steady. "I appreciate everything you're saying, Richard, but I need to make something clear." Richard raised an eyebrow, intrigued but cautious. "Of course. What's on your mind?" "Let's not pretend this is about just the clothes," she said, her voice calm but firm. "This is about power, ownership. You've built a legacy, sure, but you built it on the backs of women like me who weren't even allowed in your doors. So if we're going to work together, I want more than a partnership. I want equity." The words hung in the air, heavy with challenge. Richard's jaw tightened. He hadn't expected this boldness. The negotiations had always been about terms, the logistics of collaborating, the marketing strategies. But Ava wasn't interested in playing by their rules anymore. "I'm not just a designer," she continued, her voice unwavering. "I'm an architect of this future. I'm building something that doesn't need to fit into your world, but I'm offering you the chance to build it with me." The silence stretched between them, Richard's eyes searching her face, trying to read her. He had underestimated her once, and now he was seeing exactly what he was up against. Finally, he leaned back in his chair, letting the tension settle. "You're a tough negotiator, Ms. Sinclair," he said, a reluctant admiration in his voice. "I can respect that. But understand this. It's a risk. Partnering with you means changing everything we've built." Ava smiled, a small, knowing curve of her lips. "Then you'll have to decide whether you're ready for change. Because it's happening. With or without you?" Richard let out a slow breath. His hesitation was evident, but as he looked into Ava's unwavering eyes, he knew one thing. She was right. And if he wanted to remain relevant, he would have to embrace that truth. "Let's talk terms," he said, finally breaking. Ava nodded. She wasn't just in this for a seat at the table. She was here to own it. The weeks that followed the meeting with Richard Langston felt like a dream and a nightmare all at once. Ava had spent years fighting to get into the room, but now that she was in, she found herself battling a new kind of war, the war of power. Richard had agreed, reluctantly, to the terms Ava had laid out. They would partner, but it would be a partnership with equal stakes. Langston Atelier would help distribute Sinclair Mode in their exclusive boutiques, but Ava would have a seat at the table, real ownership, real influence in how the business ran. But the terms were only the beginning. Behind closed doors, Richard's team was already working to merge their operations with Ava's. The brand's rebranding was underway, new logos, new marketing strategies, all designed to make Sinclair Mode an undeniable force in luxury fashion. Ava was thrust into meetings with PR firms, finance executives, designers, and strategists, each one more polished than the last. But every decision came with a cost. Ava felt herself being pulled in different directions. Richard, for all his charm and experience, still viewed Sinclair Mode as an upstart, a raw, emerging brand that needed refinement. His suggestions came with a silver lining of experience, but there was always a subtle undertone. It could be better. It could be bigger. It could be more like Langston Atelier. He'd never outright say it, but Ava knew. One evening, after a particularly grueling meeting in which Richard pushed for yet another shift in the aesthetic of her collection, Ava found herself alone in her apartment. The quiet of the room felt deafening after the cacophony of boardroom discussions and luxury-focused proposals. She sat at her desk, staring at the sketch for her next piece, a bright, flowing gown, bold and vibrant, with an edge that only she knew how to execute. But even this, her creation, her vision, felt muted. Was she losing herself in this new partnership? Was she bending too much to the vision of others? As if on cue, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Lila, one of the few friends Ava had kept close during her rise. She had been Ava's confidant through it all, the long nights, the brutal rejections, the triumphs. "Are you okay? You've been quieter lately. This whole Langston thing. Don't forget who you are." Ava stared at the message. Don't forget who you are. The truth of Lila's words hit her like a gut punch. Ava had worked too hard to let someone else rewrite her story. She wasn't here to bend to anyone's vision. She was here to expand the possibilities, to show the world that her designs didn't just belong in a luxury boutique, they redefined luxury. The next morning, Ava sat in a meeting with Richard. His team had been pushing for a major shift in the brand's image, a complete overhaul of her latest collection to fit what they believed was more marketable. The gowns had become safer, the cuts less daring, the colors softer. Richard's plan was to make Sinclair Mode more approachable, more like what the wealthy elite were used to. Ava had had enough. "Richard," she began, her voice calm but unwavering, "I appreciate everything you've done for the brand, but I'm not going to water it down. You asked for my vision. And this isn't it. Sinclair Mode was built on the idea of breaking barriers, not fitting inside them. If you want to change that, you're doing it without me." The room fell silent. Richard's eyes narrowed, but Ava didn't flinch. The power had shifted. "I don't want to change what makes it great. I want to amplify it," she added, her gaze firm. "And if that's not something we can agree on, then maybe it's time to reevaluate this partnership." For the first time, Richard Langston looked uncertain, but Ava didn't wait for him to respond. She stood, a new confidence radiating from her. The ball was in her court now, and for the first time, Ava realized that this partnership, this deal, wasn't the finish line. It was just the beginning. She didn't need Langston Atelier to succeed. She was success. When she left that meeting, the weight that had been on her shoulders lifted. She had found her voice, and this time, no one was going to silence it. Ava hadn't expected to find herself standing at the edge of a precipice, not after everything she'd fought for. But here she was, at the pinnacle of her success, surrounded by wealth, opportunity, and Langston Atelier's high society world, and it felt more suffocating than ever. The grand opening of her first Sinclair Mode flagship store had been everything she'd dreamed of and more. Celebrities were draped in her designs. Photographers captured every moment, the flashing lights blinding her as she stood at the center, taking it all in. The press had adored her. Social media was ablaze with hashtags, everyone calling her a game-changer, a woman who had defied the odds. But behind the glossy pictures and champagne toasts, Ava felt the dissonance settle in her bones. There was a price to this success, a price she hadn't anticipated. Richard Langston had been everywhere that night, making sure the cameras caught their every interaction, framing him as her mentor, her partner. The whispers among the guests told a different story, though. They saw what Ava couldn't escape, Richard's iron grip on the reins of the business, his shadow looming over every decision. And that shadow grew darker each day. The compromises had begun long ago, but now they were undeniable. Every new piece Ava created was met with resistance. It's too bold. It's too much. Let's tone it down. Richard's suggestions were always wrapped in the guise of marketability, but she could feel the underlying message. Stay in your lane. Ava had sacrificed too much to get here, too much to let her designs be buried under the weight of corporate agendas. Her boldness, her unapologetic vision, was the reason she had come this far. But now it felt like she was fighting an invisible battle, one she couldn't seem to win. As the weeks passed, the tension between her and Richard escalated. There were no more warm meetings, no more casual talks over coffee. Every interaction had become a negotiation, one that Ava was losing. The worst part was that Richard seemed to be winning the hearts of everyone in the industry, positioning himself as the mastermind behind Sinclair Mode's success. People were starting to refer to the brand as Langston's latest find, as if Ava was just a figurehead in her own empire. And it was during one of those quiet, agonizing nights, when the studio lights flickered above her as she bent over her sewing machine, that the breaking point came. Ava's phone buzzed on the table, a simple notification. Richard Langston tagged you in a post. She hesitated, knowing that any interaction with him was likely just another move in the game of control. But she clicked the notification anyway. Richard's post was a sleek black-and-white photo of him, holding a Sinclair Mode garment in his hands, his sharp suit a perfect contrast to the flowing design. The caption read, "Proud to bring at Sinclair Mode to new heights. The future of fashion is now." No mention of Ava, no mention of her vision, just Richard, a mentor, a magnate, a mogul. That was the final straw. Ava stared at the screen, rage and heartbreak flooding through her in equal measure. She had spent so long trying to make this partnership work, trying to balance her vision with his demands, but this was the moment when she realized the truth. Richard wasn't her partner. He wasn't even a collaborator. He was taking over. With the phone still in her hand, she called Lila, her voice shaking but resolute. "I can't do this anymore," she said, the words coming out raw, a confession. "I've given everything I have to this, and it's not enough. He's not letting me be me." Lila's voice was steady, the comforting presence Ava needed. "So what are you going to do?" Ava looked around her tiny studio, the place where it had all started, the place where she had built Sinclair Mode from nothing. The realization hit her. She had always been enough. "I'm going to take it all back," Ava whispered. "I'm going to own my brand again, all of it." She hung up the phone, stood up, and walked to the center of the room, where the mood boards she had carefully crafted over the years still stood. In that moment, Ava knew exactly what she had to do. It was time to break free. Time to reclaim what was hers. The world had seen her rise, but they hadn't seen the fight, the real fight. And Ava was about to show them who she really was. No more compromises, no more shadows. This was her legacy, and she was going to own it. The morning light filtered through the windows of Ava's new studio, casting soft rays over the sketches that littered her desk. She looked around at the space, an unassuming loft in the heart of the city, far from the gilded confines of Langston Atelier. But it was hers. Every inch of it was a reflection of the woman she had become, raw, unapologetic, and fiercely independent. It had been 6 months since Ava had severed her ties with Richard Langston. The legal battles had been intense, but she'd fought hard to reclaim Sinclair Mode. She had no desire to tear down what they had built together. She simply wanted to build it on her own terms. Every sleepless night, every strategic phone call had led to this, the rebirth of her brand. Ava had always known that the essence of Sinclair Mode wasn't just about clothes. It was about empowerment, about making women, especially women of color, feel unstoppable. She had envisioned a line that spoke to resilience, to defying expectations, to showing the world that beauty had no boundaries. But when she'd walked away from Langston Atelier, she'd walked away from all of that. The prestige, the luxury, the glamorous facade. She had returned to the streets, to the people, to the roots of what had made Sinclair Mode the force it had become. Now she was bringing it all back, this time on her own terms. Her first collection since parting ways with Langston was ready, and it was everything she had ever wanted it to be. Bold colors, intricate beadwork, daring silhouettes, and an unapologetic celebration of black beauty. No more compromise. No more muted designs to fit a palatable narrative. This collection was fierce. It was revolutionary. The launch event was set for tonight, a private showcase in the new studio. Ava had sent out invites to a select few, the people who had stood by her from the beginning, the models who had walked for her in small shows, the influencers who had been loyal even when no one else believed in her. Tonight, they would see what Sinclair Mode was truly capable of. As the evening approached, Ava stood before the full-length mirror, adjusting the fit of her own gown, a stunning floor-length piece with a plunging neckline, adorned with shimmering gold threads that formed intricate patterns down the sides. It was one of her favorites, a piece that represented everything she'd fought for: beauty, strength, and authenticity. The studio was filled with excitement as guests began to arrive, their eyes wide with wonder as they took in the new designs. The energy in the room was electric, but it wasn't the usual aura of corporate coolness that had surrounded her in Langston Atelier's world. This was something raw, something real. It was the feeling of a community coming together to witness the future unfold before their eyes. The show began, and one by one, the models took the runway, each of them embodying the essence of Sinclair Mode. The crowd gasped, murmuring their approval, but Ava wasn't looking at them. She wasn't looking for their validation. She was watching her own vision take flight, watching the story she had written for herself become a reality. The final model emerged, wearing the piece that Ava had designed as a tribute to her mother, a black silk gown, the fabric embroidered with golden thread that mimicked the pattern of an African quilt. It was a symbol of strength, a celebration of ancestry, and a message to the world. Ava Sinclair was here, and she was unstoppable. As the last model twirled off the runway, the room erupted in applause, but Ava stood still, her heart pounding. She had done it. She had made it. This wasn't the end of her journey. It was only the beginning. And as she looked around at the faces of the people who had supported her, she knew this was her true family, her true community. The fight had been long, but now Sinclair Mode was free, and so was she. The world would never forget her name. Ava Sinclair wasn't just a designer, she was a force, and no one could ever take that away. If Ava's story inspired you, if you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or told you didn't belong, remember this: your power lies in your authenticity. Don't let anyone rewrite your story. You are the author. Tell us in the comments. Have you ever turned rejection into redemption? We want to hear your story. Like if you felt Ava's strength. Share this with someone who needs a reminder of their worth. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories that uplift, inspire, and shake the system. because this is more than content. This is a movement. This is your platform. This is real stories, real power. See you in the next one. Explosion.